You mentioned a couple features that you guys offer. Can you kind of walk through, so for someone who's listening that maybe they have a property, a handful of properties, haven't really used much technology before when it comes to managing their properties, what does that look like for like what is the progression, like what are the components or maybe top features that you see them using as they get into this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it differs for different people. One, for example, was actually also a veteran. This is early on in the platform. I was like working with support with it myself. It was when I found out that North Pole, Alaska is a real place. He was stationed up in Alaska. He had a single family home up in North Pole, Alaska, which I really had to just go Google and actually make sure. I pull it up from time to time just to see how it's doing because it's kind of fun to look back on. They have a Domino's now. I'm like, that's kind of fun. But he had moved back
Nice.
from Colorado, still had the single family in North Pole, Alaska, and he's like, I want to keep the single family I have up there, but I want to live in Colorado now. For him, the big draw initially was that he had a person in the area that could do the maintenance locally that he wanted to just add into the platform. So basically add him to his team, which is something you can add if you want to. And so he basically gave him maintenance access. And that would mean that anytime a tenant submitted something and saying something was wrong, even if he was in Colorado, he can see what's going on. He can see if the maintenance person is like replying to that, completing all the work. He gets all the oversight, but he doesn't have to do it himself anymore if he's,
Mm,
states away. And for someone like him, it was really ensuring that he had a tenant in the unit. It would be easy for them to collect rent when he's in Colorado instead of Alaska. All of those payments went straight through to him. He'd be able to set up automatic schedules for when he wants the tenant reminded and set up the late fees for that. So he's not manually doing all of that work. And so I think from that perspective, it's almost like enabling you to, as much as possible, set up your rules and kind of like teach the platform what you want it to do, what you would almost tell any person you would want it to do, and then let it largely run itself until if you want to fill that unit the next time. And I think the flip side of
mm.
it is people that are in that fill the unit side of things, which is needing to find the actual tenant. And so um, largely similar to the application side we talked about, it's in my mind about giving people a smart template that they can start with and then let them change it from where they want from there. So we do that on the pre-qual side, which is based on, at this point, over $30 billion in assets under management on the platform across all 50 states that landlords have been actively managing for, I can't believe, almost 10 years now. And being able to learn from that. I think one of the beauties of it is we're able to actually learn from that data and then build that back into those kind of smart defaults of the platform so that when you're starting with your pre-qualification or your application or putting up your listing that we help syndicate out to places like Zillow and other places, that you're getting kind of those best practices naturally built in. So I think largely it's a factor of someone that says kind of, I have this occupied unit that I wish was a little easier for me to manage or
Mm.
delegate portions of this out for. And then a group of people that's saying, I'm trying to fill this unit that if I can fill this unit with someone that's really good, that isn't going to, pay late, that's going to pay on time, that's going to renew with me over time. I think that's the dream, the real goal of like long-term rentals is steady cash flow where tenants don't turn over. You don't have to deal with as much vacancy. But a lot of that's grounded in finding, right, like that good tenant that's going to actually achieve that for you. So I view that as kind of the angle, at least, that we take in trying to support them in that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I can see how valuable that is. And after you've had so much experience over the last 10 years of seeing so many landlords use your platform, where do you see the biggest mistakes people make? So like if someone's listening to this and they're getting started, like things that they should maybe preemptively start thinking about or avoid in terms of mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I would say one of the mistakes is actually undervaluing some of the little actions. Sometimes
Mm,
it feels like a small thing you do is insignificant, and a lot of what we've seen is that some of the small actions that like the best landlords are taking seem um, almost like something you could sometimes skip. like rent reminders is something that we added to the platform because people asked for it. But it's one of those that when we added it was because people wanted it, but it wasn't because we could prove it actually made a difference, right? And I
Mm,
think that's one of the differences that we've learned over time is like there's things that we can actually say prove it makes a difference versus something that someone's wanted. Well, we'll like be able to say like sure that may exist in a platform, but from the data we've been able to analyze across all these properties, it doesn't actually make a meaningful difference in your ROI or your cash flow or anything like that. One of those that we saw was around those rent reminders. We found that if you consistently remind your tenant, forget about using RentRedi or not, right? Like if you just text your tenant tomorrow, or not tomorrow, it's the January 14th, when we're doing this. But if you text your tenant right before the end of the month to let them know about paying rent, they are about 30% more likely to pay rent on time. Which you would think that like a tenant's going to pay rent on time if they have the money or they can do it or not. In reality, what we find is that people have busy lives, and even people with good intentions that like want to pay you on time for rent, things just come up and you forget it's the first and it goes beyond the first and you realize you've missed rent payments. Some of those little actions we found have like actually made a significant difference for people. And so our part in that is like try to automate that so you don't have to text them. But even if you're not going to do that, even if you just say, I'm going to text my tenants, it might seem more insignificant than you realize, but it actually makes a big difference in actually getting your rent on time and your cash flows. It's like, it's one of those nuggets that costs you nothing and can actually make a difference on your cash flow.
got it. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, I can relate to so much of what you're identifying, and all the mistakes that I made in the beginning. Uh, what I know turnover is always a issue for landlords. That's one of the most costly aspects. You get a month or two of vacancy, and it just basically ate up all your cash flow that you've saved up. So how how does this maybe reduce turnover time?
Yeah, yeah. So there's a couple ways. In the turnover, there's an aspect of turnover time that you were asking about how it reduces turnover time, and I think there's also a portion of actually reducing turnover itself. Um, so we found that the majority of tenants that move actually move within the same county, the same area. They're largely moving not because they need to move, but because they choose to move. And I think it's a really interesting aspect to look at from both rentals as well as it is from like any business perspective, right? There's a moment where someone, anytime they're buying anything from you, whether they're a tenant renting from you or a customer for a business, where they're excited about what you're doing, right? Like they come in, you have this great rental, it looks amazing, they're excited to be there, and at some point they decide to leave. Maybe they needed to move to a different part of the country and fair. You couldn't have impacted that. But what we found is largely there is the ability to impact them staying in that unit, and it comes from them being happy staying there. And so we actually looked at landlords that were on our platform that had several tenants that had stayed for very long periods of time, like talking 4 or 5 years,
Mm,
and had repeated that type of success across other tenants to try to understand, like, are they doing something different than other landlords that's causing them to like artificially create these long-term tenants that others aren't necessarily always creating. One of them that we found and came through some of the interviewing. So basically pulled these, we're able to analyze the portfolios of these landlords and then talk with some of them and interview some of them. One was for this woman that had grown her portfolio from a handful of units to over 45 units. It was really interesting sitting down with her, and we could see the same thing in her data from a maintenance first response perspective. She was extremely fast. It didn't necessarily mean the maintenance issue got fixed faster, but when a tenant submitted something in saying something was broken, and that wasn't necessarily extremely frequently or anything, but
mhm.
when or if something went wrong, their initial response back to of her just replying within the platform, she could pop it open and like chat with the tenant from that maintenance issue. Her initial response being like same day was a game changer for, in her perspective, actually retaining those tenants. And it's one of those things that doesn't seem like a lot at first, but when you really think about it, it's like if you have something that goes wrong, and I imagine we probably all had this with like something somewhere in our own personal lives where like you like buy something and something goes wrong. You could be at a restaurant or something like the food, doesn't come out as well as you hoped it would. And like the server's right there, they're apologetic. They're like, oh, let me go fix this for you. And they like fix that for you and bring it back. And you almost leave that experience going like, wow, I almost feel bad I said anything at all.
Yeah,
Like they're so
totally. Yeah.
nice about that. And they made that experience almost like a positive experience from a negative one. And I view the same thing from the maintenance perspective, where like something can go wrong, something will go wrong at any type of like rental or business. And ultimately, if you can be the person that they view as that person's always there for me. And to be honest, it doesn't always have to be you. I think that's one of the benefits of being able to like delegate some of these things over time, whether they're to like maintenance coordination services. We plug into a couple for that reason, or you find a maintenance person in your area and just say, I'm just going to stick them in and delegate it to them, or you do it for yourself for a while. Whatever way you do it, it seems to make a really big impact to have that response rate. As to answer your question on kind of the reducing of turnover. In terms of the filling side, largely what we found is that if you can spend more time with the people that you're most likely to rent with, you will decrease your vacancy time significantly. And so that's where pre-screening people can make a really big difference, even if it's just a couple questions that you ask them. If they have a dog and you don't rent to people that have pets, just not going through the initial showing process with them and full application process with them ultimately means you're spending more time focused on the people you can rent to. It's almost like if you think of them as businesses we'll talk about as like qualified leads. If you look at like a enterprise business, right? A lot of landlords don't innately look at it as like, do I have a qualified lead that I'm spending time with? I have a lead, and I'm gonna like have this unit be shown to this tenant and spend time with them. But if you can actually help self-select in that by screening a little bit up front, honestly, you end up saving them money, you save them time, you save yourself time, you get your unit filled, and ultimately you end up making a lot more money because your unit's not sitting vacant as long. So it's certainly important to do. I think a lot of the more natural thinking things of like publishing out to as many places you can and getting as many leads in. But I think one of those lesser intuitive ones, or ones that's I think like a constant, just like natural draw. I think it's human nature that like if you have a lead in front of you, you should treat every lead exactly the same. And in reality, what you may find is if there's some questions you can ask about ensuring that person's going to meet whatever qualifications you have about like pets or smoking or financial or whatever it might be, that then that they are at least a good prospect, and you can still vet and do the full screening and income verification and all of that afterwards. But it can save you a lot of time in the process.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that. So RentRedi basically allows you to set up a few screening questions, and then you can push your listing out to all the different listing platforms. Is that
right? Exactly.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So they can't even book a screening of the property unless they qualify.
As long as you want it to be that way. You can change it if you want to. But yeah, that's largely what we found has been pretty successful for people, is if they go through that process. And candidly, again, it wasn't our bright idea. It came from the first person I talked to about it was actually someone that had a 2,000 unit portfolio out in New Jersey. I used to go to this Property Owners Association of New Jersey out in the Oranges in New Jersey. And I sat down and talked with this guy. I was talking about like, is there anything you're doing that's really, really different than what you feel like other people are doing? And he said, honestly, I can't believe it, but like, I feel like I'm the only one that does pre-qualifications. Like, why am I the only one that's screening people on this? I was like, do you mind like showing me like what you're doing? Could we try to build like this into it? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. I'll share it with you. And he shared it with me. He's great. But largely it came from like someone that had lived through the experience of growing that portfolio from nothing to 2,000 unit plus. And you don't have to necessarily have like a 2,000 unit portfolio to do that. But the premise of why he's doing it applies whether you're 1 unit or 1,000 units.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and also to your first point too around replying quickly. I think this is something that is more intuitive to short-term rentals, which we invest in, where it's like you need to get back to your guest immediately. And our whole team is trained on that. And it's funny because I just recently read a study that they did on customer satisfaction. and they showed like customer satisfaction throughout their whole experience. And it, like if something bad happens, like you mentioned, like the food doesn't come out right or something, the customer satisfaction dips. But if you respond to it immediately and you show that you're sorry and that you're going to fix it, the end point of customer satisfaction on the graph is actually much higher than it would have been had nothing happened. So it
Right.
actually, the
Yes.
customer walks away at a higher level of customer satisfaction and is more likely to leave you a positive review because you solved because you had a problem. More
Yes.
likely than if you just don't have a problem at all. So I'm
Right.
not advocating for manufacturing problems, but at the same time, like it's a good lesson that it's crazy to me that landlords will just like, oh, that'll go away. I just, as long as I don't respond, maybe they'll just fix it themselves. And it's like, no, it's so much better to just check in with them, make sure it's fixed, or tell them that you're on it and let them know that they have that peace of mind. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's you're absolutely right. It feels like it's a problem and only a problem, but it really is truly an opportunity. Like it's a blessing in disguise
yeah,
sometimes that you exactly like you said, you can end up with someone happier than if nothing had happened at all.
absolutely, yeah. I imagine that this allows, RentRedi allows landlords to scale much quicker as well. Have you seen that as you looked across landlords? Like, what do you? I mean, I guess how could it be used to allow you to scale quicker than
Yeah.
you otherwise would have been without it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have looked at that. There's a certain segment of users whose like goal is right. Like I'm at 2 today, and I want to get to 10. I want to get to 20. I want to get to 50, whatever it might be. Like people have this number in their mind that they're
Yeah,
trying to get to, and it's fun, right? Like it's fun to be a little part of that. Um, Largely, what I found is again, it's really not so different than any other business. I think a lot of like founder led businesses in general, startups in general, often will face this same type of thing where like you're able to do a great job when it's just you. But then as it starts to get bigger, you start to have this problem where you're like, so much relies on specifically me to do that thing that I become the bottleneck for my own business to
yeah,
grow. Right. And so you reach this point where you're saying like, how can I delegate this, but ensure I keep the quality of this, or have bring in more people where I can do this, or have a tool handle this for me. So largely, we've tried to take that same approach that I would almost recommend to like any business to do, right? Which is like build on a foundation that works really well for you, right? Like it has to be easy enough for you. If it's not, you won't get to the point where you have that problem where you're like, I have to start replacing myself for different things.
yeah,
But also know that you have like these parachutes you can pull in different areas, and you largely get to be the one to decide that. And I think it is a different decision for different people. Like I think there's certain people that, for example, like holding on to the maintenance side longer. Like they just feel like I want to make sure that it's not like destroying my home, and I want to hold on to that. There's on the flip side people that are like couldn't be happier to say I'm not getting a call in the middle of the night and I
yeah,
need to hand that off. Um, and, or the calm side that we're talking about, to stay on that topic, same type of thing. So the way that we've approached it is um, we have internal chat where you can chat with your tenants. It's just like if you were texting your tenant. Um, it feels even a little more professional than just the giving out your phone number. But the beauty of it is when they're texting in, you have that whole history there. It's not mixed with like your friends texting you or your kids, your parents, or whatever it might be, and you like lose track of whatever that thing you're. So it's centralized in that zone. But then also, if you have a partner that you're investing with, they can see it. If you eventually bring in someone that you want to reply to those different things, you can have them do it. And so you're not the only person that has that. It's not just
mm,
like they have your phone number forever and they're always texting you in the middle of the night. You're like, I wish you text this other person.
yeah,
The same thing's true on the maintenance side, where I view it as like 3 different flavors. There's the like do it yourself. There's add a teammate in that you want to do it, like somebody you actually know and trust that you want in there. And then there was a flavor to that again came not from ideas from us, but from people on the platform that said, I don't want to do it myself. I don't know somebody that can do this. Can you find someone? The short answer was honestly really no. Like we weren't directly the one to go build the network for that. But there are some companies that had spent a lot of time building out these maintenance networks. And unfortunately, it was only really offered to very large property managers. And I think that's been like one of the beauties of the role that we've been able to play in this is that because we don't get treated as, with Ryan with a handful of properties and Kirby with a handful of properties, we get treated as this massive, like $30 billion portfolio when we approach these companies, is we can say, don't treat us as small individual landlords. Instead, we have like this power of this community to basically say, treat us as this massive portfolio. If we were a REIT, we'd be one of the biggest REITs in the country at this point.
Really?
And
Wow.
so, yeah, so it gave us the ability to go to some of these maintenance coordination services who had typically only serviced massive portfolios and say, service the effectively like RentRedi portfolio. It's independent landlords, but like treat us like you would treat them. And it worked. So the beauty of it then is that like they have that third flavor where they can basically say, you handle the maintenance triage and booking of vendors and doing all the work. I'm still going to see it. So I know if you're like doing good work or if I'm happy with that, or I want to take that back or whatever I might want to do. Like you get the oversight still, but you don't necessarily have to do it yourself or even put in your person if you don't want to. And I think that's some of the fun in this is that like as we continue growing and growing, it gives us more and more ability to say, as people approach us with problems and say, I want to, access to this thing or to be able to do this thing that historically like I've been cut out of because the portfolio wasn't relatively large enough that we can kind of go to bat for them, and like be able to create or facilitate that thing that they want access to, even if we're not directly doing it ourselves. And we just kind of become the connective tissue to make it easier for them.